Awesome. So I'm really excited to be here. I am the new museum director. It's a huge honor. I'm really excited to see a lot of new faces, some people I recognize. As I mentioned before, please feel free to stop by on the weekends to take a look around. I can give tours. But I'm so excited that you showed up to learn a little bit more about love and historic fashion in Senoia. So to get us started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I am a Sharpsburg native. I grew up just down Highway 16. I've been here pretty much all my life. I have a lot of fond memories of coming to Senoia to see the parades, walk around the shops. I remember when The Walking Dead first came here and like how everything just ticked up. So it's a huge honor to be able to help tell Senoia's story and a lot of its history. I did go away for college. I went to Athens to go to UTA, go dogs. And I graduated with my degree in anthropology. Following that, I worked with the Muskogee Nation to do archaeological school, which was a really cool. We were in Savannah, so there's so much history there. And history and storytelling is just a huge passion of mine. Presentation's a little slow. So today I'm going to go over a couple of different things. I'm going to talk about the Carmichael dress, the Hollberg dress, the Barnett dress, as well as some postcards and other little love stories we know about Senoia that are on display in our museum. Starting off, I'm going to give a little bit of history about wedding dresses and the culture of weddings. What might surprise some of you is that wedding dresses were not always white. Actually, for a long time, they were blue or even purple or just the nicest dress that you owned, which is the case for the Carmichael dress. Across different cultures, there are different wedding traditions. The one I have up here that I found really interesting was the culture of the Shi people in China. They wore something called a phoenix dress. Both men and women took on phoenix garb, and it was this beautiful, brilliant red and gold attire that is still worn today. Here, if you can see it, it's kind of small, is a Greek costume from the 18th century. As you can tell, it is green and gold, which is not what we would identify with as a wedding dress. It wasn't until the 1840s that wedding dresses really became white. Queen Victoria married Prince Albert in the 1840s, and she wore a white dress, which was super unusual for the time. But it was her favorite color, and she wanted to stand out, which in the Western world launched a huge trend, but it would not be for a couple decades before it really became what we know today, where a wedding dress almost has to be white to be recognized. Oh, there we go. So this is the Carmichael dress. It's perhaps my favorite dress in our collection. It is from the year 1883. And as you can tell, it's this beautiful, rich purple color. It's made of silk satin and silk velvet. And it was worn many times throughout its life. As you can tell, the fashion back then was very different from what it is now. We have this beautiful S-shaped silhouette and this large bustle, which is just, I just want y'all to take a moment to appreciate how tiny this lady was. We cannot button it all the way on the mannequin because she was itty bitty, itty bitty. And yet she had this large bustle that she would wear. She would have been tightly corseted, wearing at least 2 petticoats, which, you know, in Senoia, Georgia would be pretty hot. Just so y'all know. But Miss Carmichael actually lived in this house. They bought it when it was just 2 rooms, and they would expand it to 4. They raised 8 of their 10 children in this house. This itty bitty lady had 10 kids. But it has these beautiful detailings with this velvet trim, which is still velvet. There's a little bit of wear and tear from daily use because back then, wedding dresses were not one and done. You would wear it over almost until it gave out or until you had to make it into something new, which was both fashionable and practical. But we have this beautiful velvet trim, this silk ribbon, which has this wonderful detailing. To me, it looks like books. And then these coat of arms buttons, which lead up to this very high collar. And I went over that a little bit. You can see, for those of us without the eagle eyes, you can see this beautiful coat of arms button. To my research, the coat of arms is not any particular family. It just seems to have been a popular button of the time. You can actually find them on eBay, which is interesting because someone's taking apart, 19th century clothing for buttons, or they're just finding them. But the legacy lives on. Her grandchild and her great-grandchild would go on to wear this dress in passing, as like trying it on to see, what I might have looked like back in the day. There's a funny story where her great-grandchild, almost 100 years later, puts on this beautiful dress, and you can see her hands are like put in front of herself because she could not button it. Just like this issue with our mannequin. She's over there like, look at perfect pose, no reason at all. Before it was donated to this museum and is now on display in one of our cases. I did not realize until we took it out of the case just how short she was because it was on a wooden like apple box. Now there is a little mystery in our museum that we have discovered while doing this project, which is the Hollberg dress. This is a lot more similar to what you would picture a wedding dress now. It's white. It would have originally been a much brighter white, but age has really darkened it a little, but I still think it's really pretty. It's almost a tea color. But in our minds, this is more of a wedding dress than this, right? Maybe not. So Miss Lily Sibley married Mr. Hollberg. The Hollbergs were a very influential family in town, and she was a very fashionable young lady. This is in the Gibson dress style, which includes a motto bust and bishop sleeves. We run into issues, though, as the more we research this, the more we discovered she would have been a very, very fashion-forward lady. Her wedding was in 1896, which was, the mid-1890s, almost the turn of the century, but not quite. Less than 2 decades after this dress. So this would be a very shocking silhouette change. The Gibson style hasn't really caught on yet by that time. We see these beautiful sleeves here that we have puffed up. Very, very unusual compared to this very sleek sleeve. The mono blouse had not yet come into fashion by the mid-1890s. We instead see these very tightly corseted S-shaped figures. Even the neckline is a little unusual with this flower trim and the tie and the ties in the back. Which leads us to question. We know she was married in the 1890s, but was this her wedding dress? Over here for comparison, I have a fashionable wedding dress from the 1890s. You can tell the shape is different. It's much more structured. It's actually from 1896. It's from the same year. And we know that fashion trends can vary dramatically across regions. But is it that dramatic? So I'm left with this question of, is this dress Miss Lillian Hollberg's actual wedding dress? We're inclined to say no, me and Margaret, who is our textile expert. This might not have actually been her wedding dress. It was very light. It was almost certainly her dress. We know that for sure. She was a very fashionable and very wealthy young lady. She would have had the means to acquire such a fashionable gown, but this gown is more equivalent to the early 1900s. And once we wash it, it'll become this very bright white cotton lingerie color. We have a similar dress in the Senoia room, which was actually a child version, and you can compare the styles in the timeline. But a little mystery of our museum. Whoops. Uncovering things. And then we move on to the Barnett dress. As you can tell, less than 100 years later, the fashion has changed dramatically. The hemlines have raised. You can see her ankles. How exciting! People are no longer extremely corseted. She might have worn shapewear, but it was unlikely that she was wearing a very tightly laced corset, unlike Miss Carmichael. The material has also changed. So what's actually interesting to me is as we move down the timeline, we encounter synthetic materials. This is acetone lace, or acetate lace, silk. And if you spill nail polish on it, it will dissolve. Which is interesting. Please don't spill nail polish on it, otherwise our dress will dissolve. But it was handmade by her grandmother, which is very sweet, and it's a two-part dress. It would have been worn with a crinoline underneath. To poof it out, we put a crinoline under it, so you can kind of see that very classic 50s silhouette. Think, like the poodle skirts and the roller skating. It would have been that sort of era. I really want to point out our reproduction bouquet, as it matches her wedding dress picture, which you can see behind it. And then here are some close-up details. Unlike the others, which were closed with ties and buttons, this one would have been closed with a zipper. As you can tell, she was a very tiny lady. We cannot zip it up all the way. And it has this beautiful two-part little caplet sleeve situation. The lace sleeve is not actually attached to the silk acetate dress. It would have been buttoned on over, and she could have taken it off for her reception. This beautiful picture, which I really like to showcase, is her at her actual wedding. She's wearing these beautiful white satin shoes, which were very typical of the time. And this is when we move into the era of the white wedding dress. This is when white wedding dresses became almost like a necessity. She would go on to leave a legacy of love in Senoia. She and her husband were married for 68 years until Catherine's passing. Her husband is still with us today. I don't know if he made it out to the program tonight, but he was aware of it, and he was happy to share some stories with us. Her legacy lives on through her son and her grandson, which is very exciting. And her husband still lives in Sharpsburg today. Now, I want to point out a couple these are our big, wonderful exhibits. These are very eye-catching. But we have a number of other small Valentine's Day materials. Valentine's Day has been important for a very long time. And we have a number of items in our collection. What I find interesting is a number of these postcards. I've tried to transcribe. If y'all can read cursive better than me, then you might notice some mistakes. But a number of these postcards are not being sent to people's loves. They're being sent to family. They're catching friends up, despite their Valentine's Day theme. Some of them have very romantic little writings on the front of the postcard, but the inside is like, hey, by the way, these people moved. Which we also have them over here on display. This one was actually really interesting to me, mostly because it seems to have been sent between friends, and it references this place called Savage, which I believe is a town called Savage, Minnesota, which still exists. All these postcards were sent from Senoia or sent to someone in Senoia. But they wrote the address. All these addresses, by the way, are someone's name and then the city they live in. There's not numbers. You must have been a very impressive postman back in the day. Be given a name and be like, oh yeah, I know where the Smiths live. How? Especially with this one, where Minnesota has been shortened to Min. And when you write Min in cursive, it just looks like a bunch of lines. So it took me quite a minute to figure out where is this being sent to. And this is maybe my favorite of our little postcards. It's really small. It's only like a business card size in real life. I've blown it up on the PowerPoint for y'all to see. But it was sent, or it was written in 1899. There's not a message other than just Senoia, Georgia, 1899. It is over 100 years old. And it's this beautiful dove with God's blessings be upon thee. I wonder who it went to, who it was from. Why did they write Senoia, Georgia on it? A lot of questions. Here are my resources if any of y'all ever want to learn more. There's a bunch of photos that I used, like from the Met and from other, websites. I just want to say thank you for all of y'all to come out, and a special thank you to Margaret. I couldn't have done this without her expertise. But thank you so much for coming out, and I can answer any questions.